this is a more dynamic model. It allows for more complexity, so it can house more of my own lived experience, and I'm able to map to it easier. Fowler actually introduces a different model that actually has been really helpful for me to allow space for my experience.
Ooh, we've got handouts.
So I got a little handout here, and maybe you can post an image of it or a link to it. I can send it to you. But there's basically, he models faith. He studied tons of people's lives. He studied psychological and social development, and then his contribution was, I'm now going to see how faith development fits inside of all these different personal development models. And he starts out with stage 1. It's an intuitive-projective faith. It's usually toddler to preschool age. It's defined mostly by parental behavior and attitudes, and they really have a hard time differentiating between fantasy and reality. It's all the same to them. And then stage 2 is the mythical-literal, and this is like school-aged. You start to think logically, but you understand the stories of your faith community in extremely literal ways. So in Genesis, it's like God created the world in 6 days. It's like, and it's literal in their minds, like, oh, 6 days He created the world. And then me as a scientist, I eventually arrive and find out, oh, there's all this geological evidence and evidence in the universe that it's like millions and billions of years old. And it's like, that doesn't fit in my mythical, literal faith. And so then there's a stage 3, which is synthetic conventional. And in this stage, you accept the authority of your faith tradition. And so if you came out of that mythical, literal, and you saw the Bible as the authority, right, you then have to trust that it took 6 days to make the world. And so while you're in this stage 3 of synthetic conventional faith, you find it difficult to think outside of your own faith box, right? But then stage 4 comes along, individual reflective, and I've described this where I learned, it took millions and billions of years, possibly, to make the universe and the earth. And you begin to critically examine and question your beliefs. And you see that there's actually other boxes than your own. And you're like, well, how does this all fit? And so during the stage, you often become disillusioned with your religious traditions. And that may ultimately lead to you leaving your faith, or you may just become disengaged within your own faith community. And this was the most hopeful part to me, is like, there's actually more stages beyond stage 4, right? So you don't just have to lose your faith. There's conjunctive faith. There's a stage 5, and it says this usually happens in adulthood. It's pretty rare before middle age for it to happen. People begin to recognize the limits of logic and accept paradox. So in stage 4, I'm thinking very logically. I'm like, okay, things got to make sense. Things got to connect. And because I'm critically analyzing and I want things to sort of start making sense. But then I do that for a while and I go, you know what? Like, it doesn't matter. Science. And the more I dive into science, the more I realize, there's paradox and things don't make sense in there either. Just like we talked about with the electronic charges and the strong force within that nucleus that makes up everything around us. There's a paradox contained inside of that nucleus, right? And so you often return back to your sacred stories, your faith community, but now you have an appreciation for mystery.
In this stage 5.
Yeah. And so you're okay with paradox. You're okay with mystery. You're okay with not being certain. And then stage 6, which is universalizing faith, which is pretty rare for anyone to really achieve. This is like Jesus, Mother Teresa, Gandhi. They often become martyrs because they challenge their communities so much and how they view the world and each other. And so those who reach this final rare stage are able to fully integrate their faith into their lives, serving others and valuing community over self. And so to me, this is a more dynamic model. It allows for more complexity, so it can house more of my own lived experience, and I'm able to map to it easier. And I don't feel like, for example, with the old one, when I was trying to keep the faith, and I kept having these persistent doubts and questions coming up, I would keep comparing myself to that model. And there's 2 things we got to question when that happens. Is I either have to question the model, or I have to question whether the data or my experience is valid, right? And it was because I saw so many people talking and speaking and living according to this model, and it was working for them, I was like, well, then I must be the one that's wrong and broken. But come to find out, when I got exposed to this model, I was like, wait, there is space for me. I can live a life of faith while having serious doubts and questions unresolved, it's okay to experience the mystery of faith.